Hey guys, so there's a lot to talk about just in this single episode. Honestly, the first big thing to talk about is that our heroes had managed to escape from Guilst before it was consumed by the chronophage, and honestly, just the moment of seeing the chronophage seeing the chronophage consuming Gilst, and what happened in the after effects of it, of the after effects of that consumption. This is one of those times where I truly started to respect Mashima's writing prose. I think because the obvious thing is that despite their the obvious thing to talk about is that this episode really kind of shows that despite their malicious looking appearance, the chronophages themselves are not inherently evil or good. They are simply a force of nature that acts upon inherent instinct in order to consume worlds. And obviously, to set the record straight, I'm not that the lives and livelihoods consumed along with the planet are a very horrific and lamentable loss. I'm not denying that fact, but as we see, the chronophages can pretty much be just as much of an unintentional force for good as they are an intentional force for evil, as by consuming Gil's time, it reverted backwards from a desolate and crime-ridden city to that of a more prosperous planet that, well, to say it lightly, can be livable again. And this terraforming of the planet provides the means by which to start over if anyone chooses to live there again. So yeah, it's weird to say, but this is just the whole experience, while presented horrifically, does show just how much the chronophages are a force of nature, nothing more, nothing less than that. Um, I also do like how the anime overall did focus a little bit extra on the evacuation itself, just to show that even though even though they are just a simple force for nature, just but it also shows people themselves, well, just how much that people themselves still pretty much fear them. Um, and how much of a threat that they still are to humanity, obviously, still. With that said, we finally get the reveal of the man behind the curtain who's responsible for how Guilds became what it was, and even Norma to a certain degree. Drakken Joe, the Dark Alchemist. And honestly, it's kind of hard to talk about this guy without giving away spoilers, but one thing I will say is to anyone coming into this series from having watched Red Fairy Tale and assuming he's just going to be another villain defeated by the singular power of friendship, squash any of that thought of the thought of that notion right here and now, because that's exactly what Mashima did to us manga readers. In fact, the very creation of Drakken Joe was essentially Mashima giving putting up two middle fingers to the very trope he created, and saying, "Power of friendship isn't gonna save you here. Isn't gonna save you here, bitch. This guy is a real 100% true to his core villain." And it's not only something he embraces with Dragon Joe, but it's something he kind of it's a pattern he continues even beyond the character of giving us antagonists that are despicable to their core and practically irredeemable. And I'm just gonna say it. As a manga reader myself, I've really kind of embraced how unique an idea that is, because as I grow older, part of me is really getting tired and cynical just towards the idea of taking of the idea of a protagonist who just talks it out, and who just talks it out with his enemies, or just finds common ground with the enemy in order to solve the problems of conflict. And while it is a trope, I admit that it still does have its place in manga. It doesn't necessarily reflect our real world either. And if you're working for, in Mashima's case, he's working for a magazine, Shonen magazine, where I think he's allowed to explore a lot of these ideas a little more freely, I think, and I'm sorry, I kind of like that. Even more so than that, though, Draken, it's it's Drakken Joe's appearance here in the anime that I finally clued into Mashima's formula with Eden Zero, which is he uses smaller threats and lower level antagonists to build up the bigger threat, and it's something you'll find out he has continued to do since. Now, the downside to everything I just mentioned and said about Drakken Joe is that right now he is simply going to continue onward from this point as an overarching villain, and it isn't until season 2 where he finally steps in as the main villain of his own arc. Unfortunately, like that itself is kind of the big issue with Drakken Joe, is that he's going to be, he is still going to have his appearances throughout this, like pretty much throughout the season. But as far as like when he takes the spotlight as the main villain, yeah, that's not going to be happening until season 2, unfortunately. Now, granted, thankfully, from what I hear, Eden Zero is doing very well with like the viewers. So season 2 is going to happen now. So I take that as a win, honestly. We also get 2 major reveals at the end of this episode, which is the reveal of the 3rd Starshine Hermit, leading us into the next arc, and the reveal of statues depicting the likeness of the Heavenly Knights of the Dancing Sakura, 12 heroes who defended the Sakura cosmos from a long time ago in the Dark Ages. And honestly, no joke, the reveal of these 12 statues is kind of the more critical reveal compared to Hermit herself, because while Hermit is important and she herself provides the series its own bit of psychological torture for me to endure again, the Knights of the Dancing Sakura are weirdly both a background but also an overarching element of the story. Ironically, ironically, they only become that. They ironically only become that once our heroes venture beyond the Sakura cosmos. And did I say it's hard to talk about spoilers? About spoilers with Drakken Joe? This is actually a reveal where I'm biting my tongue not to give away spoilers, because let's just say there is a precedent to believe that all of them might not be dead, and that there are just the fact that Witch and Ivory just drew certain attention to certain individuals within, shows these guys might actually be alive in some fashion today. Talking about Hermit, though, I'm gonna let her development throughout the next arc speak for itself. But I will say, when you see her next and how she interacts with the main cast, just know and keep in the back of your mind, there are reasons for her mentality and the way she speaks about humanity. Like, this is kind of, again, we're getting into parts of the story that really dive into the very gray line between what makes a machine and what makes a human, and how sometimes humans can be just as, how machines actually have the potential to be just as can be just as feeling as humans, and sometimes humans can be just as evil as machines sometimes. It's kind of a very blurred line we're diving into right now. That aside, though, there has been some back and forth about the color of Hermit's hair, and how getting rid of the green highlights from the manga does make her appearance a little less unique. And I'm kind of personally in the middle with that one. On one hand, I do get where those people are coming from, but on the other hand, as long as nothing about the character herself changes, I'm completely fine with it. And sometimes, honestly, there are going to be elements of a character that are going to be changed for just the simplicity of the anime, and that is one of those times where it is going to change, I think. We just have to live with it. Now, let's talk about Homura, because we finally get the full story behind her ether gear, her connection to the 4th and final Starshine Valkyrie, and that despite having her power, even Homura herself doesn't know where she is. And I know I keep repeating myself, but through getting all these little nuggets of information, it makes me realize just how much Mashima himself had laid the groundwork for Homura's story and her role in the series going forward. But also that right now, the series is, as you see, the series is setting this very high, optimistic tone about finding Valkyrie, but as you'll soon realize, if you haven't already, there's a subtle feeling in the air that the reality of finding Valkyrie isn't going to be anything, is going to be nothing isn't going to be anything but is going to be anything but happy or optimistic. And let's just say that we'll get into it. There's a singular moment we're going to get into that where you'll finally understand like what I'm talking about. Like, just let's just say you're going to have to continue every time Valkyrie's brought up. You're going to have to continue to kind of read the room a little bit and just kind of really understand the tone really understand the tone of how those conversations go, because let's just say it's a lot more dark than you'll real. What's happened is a lot more just yeah. It's a lot more complicated. We also get, but that aside, we also get a lot of cool character introductions through this episode. One being we get more of Sister's unfiltered personality, let's say, and the reveal that Moskoy was actually hers, like before the fake Sister just kind of like remodified her and whatnot. And yeah, the whole don't push your button dynamic is pretty much a running gag of the series that I really kind of love, frankly. But I think it might also come into play in the manga the more I think about it. We also see a conversation between Homer and Rebecca about whether the latter has ether gear, and yeah, let's just say when Rebecca does get ether gear, it's going to be much more insane than what she thinks it will be in her head. Like she does get ether gear, but it's one of those things where her power is kind of like, there have been people who kind of talk a lot about how OP the characters in Fairy Tail were. Let's just say Rebecca, a lot of that is channeled in Rebecca's ether gear. Now, there's a conversation, but now another thing is there's a conversation between Ivory and Witch, pretty much reminiscing, but one little bit of dialogue to keep in mind is there is a little bit of a passing comment about a little girl who became a pirate, and you can pretty much already guess who that is, but the reveal beyond that is just amazing. But again, this is also something I love about this series as a whole, which is how it makes exposition flow so naturally through conversation. It very rarely, if ever, feels forced. Also, maybe it's just me, but it feels like they made Weiss into an even more hilarious perv in the anime than the manga. Like, weirdly enough, that there are times where they're kind of stretching the features, his comedic features, way more than the manga in certain ways. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. I'm on Twitter, Analyst, Crunchyroll, and be sure to hit the notification button, and just share it around, guys. Death Knight of Anime, signing off. Later, guys.